Welcome to another episode of Demystifying Digital. My name is Catherine Stretton. I'm the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer of Deloitte Africa. Today we're exploring generative AI. With the hype around OpenAI, ChatGPT, developments in the world, including the impact on companies with all the shenanigans that have been going on with OpenAI over the last couple of weeks, I think it's important for us to discuss and explore the real impact. Is it hype? Is it real? And what does it mean for us here in Africa? So to unpack this concept, I've got two esteemed guests with me today. I have Arun Babu. Arun is the managing partner of Deloitte Consulting in Africa, and Jania Okwechima. She is the head of analytics and AI in West Africa at Deloitte, and a returning guest. It's lovely to have you both here.
Pleasure to be here.
So let's kick off with you, Arun. There have been some interesting stats quoted in terms of the impact, or facts quoted in terms of the impact of generative AI in the market. Some say it's as important as the advent of the internet was in the late 80s. I've also heard that the impact is likely to increase global GDP 4 to 6%. But a lot of naysayers say it's all hype. What are your views? Is it real? What is its impact going to be on business and society?
Thanks, Catherine. I'm going to make it broader than generative AI. Generative AI itself is going to have a massive impact on all sorts of industries, professions, human beings. The high part of it might be the relative importance of generative AI versus broader schools of AI. And I think AI as a broader context will have a transformative impact on humanity. And it is just the early stages of what we're seeing. And if you just play back 5 years from now, 10 years from now, imagine the rate of progress, the technology and the capabilities that we're going to face. It's going to transform every sector of society.
So how do you see this transformation playing out, Arun?
I think this would be anyone's guess. I'm going to share my perspective. I think the biggest aspect of it is how accessible this technology is to every single person. What ChatGPT, and the reason perhaps the high part of it is so big is because it's in the hands of every single human being. Even if it is 60% right and 40% wrong, every single human can access it and feel the impact of what AI can do for you. And if you play it back into all aspects of human productivity, we are a society that progressed over time by becoming incrementally more effective through basic automation, through learning to do things better, being more efficient in organizing ourselves inside large companies. Can you just imagine what all of those incremental changes look like in a transformative AI world? All of those things we made 50, 100 years to make small changes in. We went from waterfall to agile, and we spoke about what a fundamental difference that made to how products were developed. And in the new world, what does that look like? That entire world of developing a product might look quite different to what it did in the last 10 years. That's a simple example. And then when you merge it with automation at manufacturing, take it beyond kind of like human competence-based services to large-scale automation and heavy industries. Every aspect of human productivity will change. We will have to rethink what the role of a human is in most organizations.
So I'm going to flag that as something for us to explore later. But it's interesting how the opportunity has arisen. Deloitte is the first professional services company to have a dedicated generative AI practice. And one of the areas in which Deloitte is investing heavily is generative AI to write code. So you talk about the speed of change, something that takes human developers weeks or months or even years to develop will be taken over by self-learning machines. So I like that. The speed, the latency, the ability to progress, perhaps will soon exceed humans' ability to absorb it. So I guess the question then is what is the impact on organizations? How do we manage this change? And maybe I can ask Shania her thoughts in terms of how do we absorb the opportunity in a way that's still responsible as organizations? Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts, Shania?
So, Catherine, as you mentioned, Deloitte, as a professional services, we've invested in a whole generative AI practice. But that's not the only thing we've done. Before that, we had invested on a whole framework of trustworthy AI. So the two of them go together. So while it's going to transform the way we work, but we're also doing that under the umbrella of a trustworthy framework so that, yes, there are going to be codes that are going to be developed. And on the one hand, it could get out of hand. It can write itself code to go and do so many things. Nobody has any ideas, right? It could go to the one extreme or the other. However, as we are developing these models, we're also putting those checkpoints in. We have a monitoring system that will check for its trustworthiness, its transparency. How do you justify what was written? What sort of supervisory checkpoints do you put in place to make sure that it's not a black box? Just like for years, machine learning was a black box. And it was used in the industry where a decision was made that impacted someone's life, but nobody could explain. So I always say if you're building something that helps you make a decision and something's impacted, will that hold in court? So that's always, when I speak to my team, that's something that we always have in mind. And the way you do that is to make sure you can justify it, make sure it's transparent, make sure you've looked at the risks and you understand. And you put in place certain things like the underlying data that's using or the knowledge that's using to come to that decision. Who actually supervised it? It's not that I woke up in a bad mood today. I'm going to let it build a code that's going to go and destroy, something in the future. So I feel like we're naturally going to give rise to two various components of such algorithms. One that actually gets the operations done, goes and builds the code. And then another stream of such algorithms that are supervisory so that they can actually supervise what's been done. Just like in a normal, a task. Imagine I always give this example, like in a traditional sense of work, like in a bank, like I'm a banking officer, I'm at the till, I can open an account for someone else. I could also open an account for myself and just pretend that I just put $1 million in there, right? I can still do that now as a person, but there is a supervisor, an internal auditor that checks at the end of the day, etc. So I feel like it's the same thing. Nothing has changed except we're now dealing in this other world of AI and intelligent machines. So that's my viewpoint.
So that's quite an interesting perspective. I was very lucky a couple of years ago to hear a talk by Gary Kasparov. He obviously has been grappling with intelligent machines for decades. But his view also was we actually are losing the ability to manage the algorithms. As humans, we're there to shepherd the algorithms.
Absolutely.
And the point that you raised that creates a group of algorithms whose job it is to supervise the doers is quite an interesting thing. But we're seeing that more and more in this generative AI space. Because I think the nervousness around the impact on humans of generative AI is really about agents. So this new theme that's evolved over the last couple of months of asking machines to tackle tasks without telling them how. And the ability of these machines to create roles, to understand how to use the tools at their disposal, including humans as tools, and almost self-learn. So it's almost like a reinforcement learning type philosophy. It is nascent, but it's growing quickly. And I think the genesis of the OpenAI nervousness is around the growth of these agents. But one of the core principles in building these agents is to create that supervisor or the critic or the guardrails. But just reflecting on the generative AI or the open AI story, I guess the question is, it's fine to say an algorithm should supervise an algorithm at a micro scale. So in doing the task, but is there a broader ethical consideration? Because it would seem to me that this is the collision between profit-seeking motive and research driven motive about humanity and effectively enriching humanity, both sitting under the umbrella of a single organization. So how does an organization approach the broader ethical principle? How important is it for an organization to understand how and why it is required or wants to use AI? And I'll ask this question to Arun. And whose responsibility in an organization is it to make those ethical decisions or ethical pronouncements?
I'm going to start by perhaps taking it a step beyond organizations. Organizations are there to create value for all stakeholders. Okay? And often the CEO themselves sets the tone for what the organization's purpose is and how the organization impacts all stakeholders, from shareholders all the way to employees and society. And AI is just another aspect of how the organization is going to evolve, either positively or negatively. And often some stakeholders are positively impacted, some stakeholders are negatively impacted, and that choice will not change. The CEO personally has to figure out what role of AI is in the future of the organization. But this topic also goes beyond any specific organization. I mean, there's always going to be an evolution for good and evolution for selfish motives. And humanity has found a way to balance these two most of the times. Okay? All technologies evolve with set of opportunities and set of threats. And that doesn't change even in the context of AI. And I'm a positive human being that believes that just as many people that see a purely commercial opportunity, there will be sets of people saying we can use AI to solve some of the toughest problems in the world, whether it's vaccine research, whether it's easy education, and whether it's remote healthcare. So it could be an incredible source of differentiation for the solving the biggest problems humanity faces. So my view is that the good and bad will always balance each other. And human beings have managed to survive multiple waves of evolution. And this is just another evolution we all need to learn together to evolve with.
So the questions or the examples you raised there are interesting from an Africa perspective. So back to you, Jania. What do you see as the impact on Africa in Africa? Is Africa poised to take advantage of the opportunities that this technology presents?
Yes, absolutely. And that's the part that I'm most excited about, because for decades, technology gets developed in the West, say in the UK and the US, to solve the kind of problems that they are facing, or even with the kind of customization that suits those industry, society, and the public. And then they get shipped down to the rest of the world that don't necessarily fit us. I remember when you remember the face detection feature came out on cameras. You had a digital camera, it could detect faces, then you can crop or you can recognize people. It didn't work. It only worked on Caucasian faces. I remember, I always use this example, like I was excited and I was trying to take photos of my husband. There was like no face in the picture. And for those of you who don't know, my husband is Nigerian. So, and I was thinking to myself at the time, I was like, my camera is racist. And I used to use that as a joke, but it was true because it was trained on North American faces and it would not recognize the rest of the world. Whereas with this kind of technology now, generative AI, and the fact that now it's at our fingertips, and with some of the opportunities of anybody able to easily develop algorithms, that means we can really use that to create technology that is specific for our continent to solve our problems. And one great example is the large language models for local languages. Recently, there was a project in Nigeria led by Dr. Bayo from Data Science Nigeria that won the Bill and Melinda Gates Award that was creating local language models, like LLMs, for multilingual for different Nigerian dialects to provide this conversational chatbot to the unbanked, to the farmers, to the informal traders, to give them to demystify complex finance issues. They can actually have a conversation and say, I bought 3 oranges for 50 naira each, and this is my budget, this is how much saving I need to do, or I need to get a loan. And it will actually take that, from sort of speech to text and vice versa, and then provide certain steps that it can take and I can do. And those are some of the things that it gets me excited. We can build generative AI models to specifically tackle problems of poverty, education. Imagine, in the rural parts of the country where there are no schools. I mean, or maybe because of safety issues, no teacher would go and travel there, or, there's just not enough teachers to go around. You can actually have a personal tutor for every single child. And through generative AI, speaking their language, and also not just the language, another interesting thing for me is the culture. You can actually create a persona that is more close to the culture of a country. And we have unique cultures within Africa. And so you can actually personalize that to that level. So you're bringing all of that education into the most remote parts of the world. And they have top-notch education. You could be sitting in California, you could be sitting in Kaduna, and you're having the same quality of education. And that's something that for me is the most exciting. And I think we have a huge opportunity to really leapfrog. We don't have to wait for technology to be developed and shipped down to us. We can create it for ourselves. And so that's what I'm excited about.
It's interesting that you raise that, because one of the things that we hear about a lot is Africa's demographic dividend. By 2030, we'll have the largest youth population in the world.
Yeah.
Over the next century, African individuals as a proportion of the working world is going to be the only growing sector. So if we have these tools at our fingertips, how do we leverage those to make sure that we make an outsized impact as Africa and as Africans in the world?
Sure. So that's another great thing about, Africa having the youngest population, and therefore in about 10 years' time, we're going to be serving the world, the human capital. And I want to couple that with what you said before in terms of sort of the responsible AI bit and how it's impacting, and who's accountable for that. So we have an opportunity to train our youth to be ethical, because they're going to be the ones who are going to be developing this kind of technology and serving them. So we'll be tackling two problems at a time by upskilling them to learn this technology from a very young age, but also training them to be ethical and accountable, so that when it comes to their time to building this, when it goes about, just going for profit or doing the right thing, you actually couple the two of them. And so that in a few years' time, they are our LLM engineers. They are the ones coming up with these new technologies, but they're doing it in a responsible way. So I'm of the opinion that it's not going to be because machines are going to be doing everything. Even if you have the labor to serve the world, nobody needs labor. I don't think that's the case. You still, jobs evolved, roles evolve. And we are going to have that, the youth at the prime age with the skills that they've developed, and also coming from the African continent. So maybe for once it will flip. We will start developing things, introducing our rich culture and languages to now serve the whole world. But that's my personal opinion. Don't know what you guys think.
So, Arun, it's a very attractive proposition that Shania presents. But what is the risk of big tech hegemony? So we've watched with interest the OpenAI story play out in Microsoft's role, and how they've leveraged for profit the inventions of primarily a research entity. Is the need for ethics, responsibility, balance, do you think it's threatened at all by the role of big tech in the landscape at present, and I guess for the foreseeable future?
The risk perhaps is around economic concentration, that this kind of technology has a propensity to go towards the bigger players because it requires significant investment. There's innovation happening in a very dispersed way, but often the final person that monetizes it often is a set of few players. And you can see that already emerging in the world of AI, and that can disintermediate smaller markets and emerging markets often. Whether you saw that in the world of social media, you can have an entire world of globally used technologies, but often in the hands of a very few, often US or Western market players. So I think for Africa, Asia, emerging markets, we have to figure out how do we use these technologies in a way that creates value and progress for society? And there are plenty of opportunities. Jenny touched on some. There are problems we need to solve. And I think we need to get on the front foot and not be at the receiving end of a technology that's evolving globally. But this is such an accessible technology. We can solve our own problems quite fast. And the sooner we move on it, the better for us.
Let's put your professional services hat on. In the world of the corporate, how would you advise your clients to start engaging with the technologies and looking for those opportunities for value?
This feels like a repeat of digital transformation, right? When lots of these new technologies were around, we said there's different, better ways of doing business. And I would approach it the same way. There are very unique opportunities for each organization to create substantial value, whether it's efficiency, better way to serve customers, differentiating yourself from your competition, that you can by deploying something that's quite accessible. But the fear of not knowing all the details is perhaps what stops most organizations from having the confidence to do this in a meaningful way. So my conversations with exits have been to find real problems in the organizations that has got something tangible that you can solve for, whether it is your cost to serve, whether it's your ability to have targeted unique value propositions to customers, and deploy this and experiment with it with real results and real learning in a real organization. And you can scale this quite fast.
So you've mentioned a couple of things, experiments and learning. I guess the technology itself, even from ChatGPT 3 to 4 and now QStar, it's moving at such a rapid rate that what you're grappling with today is easily solved in a couple of weeks' time. How important do you think that appetite for experimentation and learning and almost a willingness to invest, even knowing that what you're developing today might be redundant tomorrow, how important is developing that culture within corporates?
I think learning mindset is going to be the number one capability of organizations if they want to survive in this new world. Because we don't know all the answers, our clients don't know all the answers, and the ability to constantly learn from competition, global players, your own employees' experiences, and being able to farm it to go and change your organization at a rapid pace becomes a source of differentiation. And it's easy to say because it requires an entire rewiring of an organization to even pick up those learning signals, because the learning signal might be happening right now inside the organization at the edge somewhere. And most often, people like ourselves often don't even see the edges sitting inside our own organization. Okay, so I think that's going to be a big change on how do you sense these things that's got huge potential, probably making a limited impact right now, but if taken to a different part of the organization and solve a bigger problem, could make a massive impact. Yeah, so I think this does require a rewiring of most organizations and how the governance works inside.
But I guess what resonates with me is your comment sounds like digital transformation. The way you do that shouldn't really have changed. It's the same as it was with the advent of digital transformation before that, with the internet economy. So it's those disciplines of innovation, it's the disciplines of scaling edges, all of the traditional ways of innovating that probably need to be doubled down on.
I mean, at the end of the day, they're pure science of either you need to be the lowest cost producer, you need to be a highly efficient organization, or you need to be a highly differentiated organization. And the economics of all of these technologies needs to be considered. And these are just capabilities available to you to do business differently.
I mean, I'm personally, as a little bit of a technophile, extremely excited. So we've created within Deloitte Africa a team called the Highly Experimental Unit to do just that. So without necessarily needing to find real opportunities in the market, to find commercially viable use cases for emerging technology, whether it's reinforcement learning or generative AI. And the easy use cases, or the things, the generative AI use cases tend to follow similar patterns. But some of the experiments in agents really make me see a new future. So how do you make digital expertise, the things humans traditionally have only been able to do? So I see the ability to take expertise, to take skill, and to democratize them. So to make them available at scale as commodities. It's got a profound impact on individuals and professionals in particular. But just to the point that you made earlier, the benefit to society for the democratization of expertise and skills, I think will have a transformative impact. So my personal view is that we haven't even begun to get our heads around what this means. And I liked your opening statement, Arun, in terms of Gen AI is one aspect, but AI as a broader domain is it's underappreciated as a force, albeit some of the techniques are decades and decades old. Shania even studied them in her undergraduate degree. So I think we're sitting on the edge of a very exciting time, but it requires that ethic, that balance, that responsibility. And I guess as a governance community, I would expect senior management in companies and boards to start having those conversations and to start thinking about.
And you see new rules coming up, like chief ethics officer or chief AI ethics officer.
And regulation.
Yep.
So it's interesting to see the debate around regulation, which is really imposing a standard that I think boards and senior management should already be grappling with. This is, to my mind, existential stuff, but the opportunity really does balance the risk. So I'm fully up for that view as well.
I'm sure you'll be a busy person. Service industries will be the most disrupted. So I'm sure you've got lots on your hand.
So that was a very interesting conversation. Thanks for joining me, colleagues.
Thank you, Catherine.
We've just touched the surface of the generative AI and I guess the broader AI conversation. So watch this space. We'll be having further conversations on these topics, a little bit more technical, perhaps more on the risk management side in future episodes.